This is the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. Revitalizing the world together. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is Neil Collins. I am the host of the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I have such a great interview lined up. But first, I want to say thank you to everybody that's reached out and given me feedback on the content that we're putting out there. I'll open my computer and I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll see some messages from some people that maybe they're on the other side of the country from where we are in the Pacific Northwest, and they're thinking about a regenerative real estate project, or somebody's doing a living building challenge, or they're a realtor in Hawaii and they want to get into green building. And so it's just awesome to see that this may not be mainstream, but it is definitely growing, and it is definitely a movement that I think people need to tune into and become a part of. And that's why we did create the online Facebook group called Regenerative Real Estate. It's a private group. You're going to have to search for it, but if you submit a request to join, myself or somebody on our team, it will let you in. That's where you can really engage with the people that are coming on this podcast, engage with us at Latitude, and I'd love to see that grow more. I also have another favor to ask. If you're liking what we're putting out, could you go on Apple or Google Podcasts or SoundCloud, wherever you're listening to this podcast, and could you leave a rating and review? And I know a lot of podcast hosts, they say this, but what I've noticed is that because we have these reviews, we're attracting such a quality thought leader. And if we can continue to snowball that, oh my God, I think that's going to be the legacy of work that I really want to contribute towards, of just helping to spread inspiration. So without further ado, I'm going to be introducing today's guest. I know that you're going to love it. Tune in, go to a silent room, turn it up, and enjoy. Hi, everybody. I am very excited to announce this week's guest. It is Sonja Bochart. She is a designer with a background in creating meaningful and healthy spaces as a designer for over 20 years. Her designs help shape spaces for connection, healing, and overall well-being. She's a sustainability principal with the national award-winning architectural design firm Shipley Bulfinch. She's an avid speaker, instructor, leader, and writer. Her portfolio spans across the built environment, including community, residential, educational, and corporate spaces. Sonja, thanks so much for taking the time. Where are you located right now?
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. I am talking to you from my home office in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, out in the desert. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, the original place I grew up is only about 12 miles away from me. Originally farmland, but not anymore, sadly. Yeah.
Sonja, I came into your work through the International Living Future Institute, but also really taking a deep dive to prepare for this show. And the designs and projects that I've seen you work on, I haven't been there personally, but they look soulful. And what I've come to realize is that we are a sum of our experiences. And so I really want to understand, who are you? Where do you come from? You've got quite the resume, but if you grew up in Arizona, what was life like growing up as a child?
So my father was an engineer, and he worked for a company, some may remember, Motorola. And he was convinced that it was very important for my sister and I to have an upbringing connected to nature. So when I was young, we moved from kind of the city part of Maricopa County to some farmland, 20 acres out in this, this very rural context. And we had one of everything. We had a goat, We had geese, we had cows, and we had horses. Actually, we had two of some things. It was amazing. It was lovely. It was challenging. There was a lot of work. I had to work. I grew up with a pretty strong work discipline in my family, and taught me a lot of values, and it taught me a lot about deep connection to the earth and to the cycles and to the seasons and to our food. We raised all of our own food. I I didn't realize how powerful it was back then. I certainly don't take it for granted now.
What do you think his desire was? An engineer with Motorola doing homesteading is an oxymoron almost.
Yeah. I think he also wanted to work the land. I think this was just as much about him and what he wanted for a lifestyle, and maybe the simplicity. But, sure enough, I wanted really nothing more when I was about 18 than to run off to the city. I wanted a different experience, and that's good too, right? That diversity and that growth and just understanding the differences. And obviously it concerns me now with our children and so many of our families and our communities growing up in these really busy, buzzing cities, the mechanics of it all. So
certainly. Which city did that take you to?
it took me to a little bigger of a city, Tempe, where I went to college. So that's where I got my Bachelor of Science in Interior Design.
Wait, and why design? What was calling you into that?
I don't have this grand story about being called to design, of having this in me all along. In fact, I think I was told by some of my instructors early on that I probably didn't have a career in this. I didn't have this God-given talent. It didn't stop me. I felt drawn to it. I've always been drawn to more of the creative arts. I thought this looks interesting. This looks interesting. My backup career, if I didn't get into design school, because it was very competitive at the time, was naturopathic medicine. So my thinking and my so much of how I evolved into healing arts within design was watching my father go through cancer treatment. And fortunately, I got into design about that time. So I think I would have enjoyed medicine too. But yeah, that was kind of the deciding factor. And certainly just watching and hearing of his experience firsthand with medicine and with treatment, and his prognosis was not good. He was given a 20% chance of surviving for 5 years.
What kind of cancer?
It was prostate cancer, and it was pretty aggressive, and it was pretty bad when they first caught it. But the good news is, he balanced Western medicine and the research and the great diagnostics with an Eastern medicine approach. Naturopathic medicine, leading edge stuff, mind-body connection. And I'm really happy to say he made it well beyond that 5-year mark. He made it, let's see, another 36 years.
Wow, that's incredible.
As a student in design at that time, working and thinking about the power of design and how we create our spaces to foster well-being and to foster healing and to be supportive, hearing his stories of going to one of the leading healthcare providers in the world and hearing of his struggles hit home for me. I said, we can do better than that. We should do better than that. So I was off on this path of wanting to change the world through design. And specifically that started off in healthcare environments for me.
Before we get into that, I was not planning on going here, but you brought it up and it very much resonates at home with me, because what I have seen is my father get prostate cancer, aggressive prostate cancer, and straddle the same divide that your dad did. My father-in-law had throat cancer, never a smoker, a band teacher. My mother-in-law just got out of brain surgery for cancer 3 weeks ago with her partner also battling prostate cancer that's quite aggressive. And to get immersed into the philosophy behind the built environment and how it can either enable us to thrive or it can subversively deteriorate our health and well-being is why we are having this discussion right now. I would not be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for that collective life experience, and to see and hear that you took two very different disciplines. What year were you in design school?
I graduated in 1996.
So in 96, it was still quite an emergent thought to overlap the built environment with health and wellness. And I am literally on the edge of my seat to understand where you went with working in the healthcare environment.
Sure. And I'm very sorry to hear about your family members too. Seems like so many of us are struggling. Well, I would say my journey from graduating and moving, I was fortunate to be mentored by some wonderful people and firms for the first 10 years of my career in Southern California. But it felt very foundational to me. And really a lot of the questions I had about design and how design is really conducive for health and well-being weren't fully answered then. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about planning and programming and medicine and what it means in these big, complex health organizations and all they provide. I mean, they're really profound. They're really quite amazing. But yet, that connection to design, it just never rang true for me. It just never, it never made complete sense. I didn't feel like I had some good frameworks to work with, some really great ways of thinking. I moved back to Phoenix in 2005 and joined another wonderful firm and kind of continued on that pathway. I met a wonderful CEO of a healthcare organization, and she taught, it's amazing how much I've learned from my clients, first of all. But she taught me a lot about patient-centered design. Plane Tree philosophies. There's an organization called Plane Tree, mind, body, patient-centered. I think in 2005, I started unlearning all of these things about putting up barriers and being mechanical and being more rigid in my thinking. Everything was kind of broken down. Everything became more vulnerable, more authentic, more human-centric. I started to love my work more. It was wonderful, and then that carried me into, I think around that time I was having a lot of stress, and so I started doing more yoga. I've heard yoga's really good for stress. I started doing more yoga, and I didn't really know how to do it well. There's this downward dog position. Where are my hands? Where are my shoulders? Where are my hips supposed to be? So I enrolled in teacher training, yoga teacher training. That was a huge shift because I learned so much more than how to position my body. I learned how to breathe. I learned how to think. I learned how to calm my mind. I learned how to open my heart. I learned how to connect to others. It was amazing. I started teaching yoga part-time. I opened up there. Yoga and the healing arts, and I pursued more in Reiki and energy. That's what helped me tune in as a designer. I think
That
that was a big point for me.
what I love about that story is that you mentioned you had to go through an unlearning process. And especially whenever you couple that in with a very stressful lifestyle or a stress inducing way that we organize ourselves into society, I'm very curious what that looks like. What kind of buildings or environments were you designing, and then how did you start influencing that if you weren't necessarily the owner of a project or the developer, but as a design consultant?
Well, I started to be less concerned about what people thought of me and be more experimental and be more bold and be more authentic and ask more questions. And about that time that maybe I was unfolding a little bit more and growing, I made my way to a Living Future conference. And I started to meet people that thought the same and people that were open to these ideas and wanted to explore and realized the way we were designing was not good enough. We were simply trying to do less bad. Were we doing good? Were we really healing our societies and healing the earth and giving us something to be really proud of? Absolutely not. So I was fortunate enough to cross paths with a CEO of a project that was just opening, a full living building challenge project. And we were dialoguing about his project. We carried on this conversation after the conference. We were talking about food and children, lifestyle, and of course about kind of spirit of place, which I'm very passionate about. I think that's really what is transformational. And we had this conversation maybe 6 months after the conference, and he said, we've got this building and it's amazing and it's functioning well. I mean, it's a living building. It's producing its own energy. It's treating its own water on site. It's non-toxic. It doesn't feel quite right. Something just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel that spirit of place that we were talking about at the conference. And the conversation led to me visiting to do kind of an assessment, kind of see what was going on. And sure enough, it was just an incredibly profound project, performance-wise, but it didn't have that spirit of place. It hadn't been expressed yet. It's not that the designers did anything wrong. It just hadn't been expressed yet. And what we co-created from that visit was the idea to do a multi-sensory biophilic program, art program. And so this was about looking at art in a way that would help foster that connection to nature. And it would be multi-sensory, and it would be rich, and it would appeal to all the senses, and it would really bring the space alive. And that ended up being co-created by a focus group of staff members. And I was able to, in helping to curate and be part of that vision, I was able to bring these ideas from healing arts, mindfulness, trying to get people out of their heads and into their hearts and into their bodies. This is not about a person's personal preference for color or form or what they like or what they don't like. This is about the unique expression and essence of a project unfolding that we are co-creating into something unique and something brilliant. And it was wonderful to work with people in mindfulness and work with them in art and work with them in visioning to co-create this vision, and then bringing in these local artists. This was not an incredibly expensive project either. And it was amazing because once artists started to hear that we were doing this program, they started reaching out to us. How can I get on this project? We hear red list compliant, and it's all about energy and intention and multisensory, and that just gave me a lot of confidence in doing this work in this way and kind of bridging that gap. Yeah, that was kind of the beginning of for me working in a different way.
I'm gonna know what you mean by multisensory environment. Can you go through that? Because I'm thinking of our six senses, and
Yes.
I'm drawing a blank on smell and touch and all these other ones.
So this program is a wonderful example because you can also get online and read about it. The client's really wonderful about sharing and storytelling. And so it's the beta project at Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens. If you do a search for beta, B-E-T-A, you'll probably find a white paper on it or some videos. But it is, it's wonderful. I don't know where to start. So there's big, large mobile art pieces that was made by a local artist, professor at Carnegie Mellon that worked in a material that is local and has a lot of rich history in Pittsburgh. It's this core 10 steel, and it was done with this symmetry that is very connected to the way we think and function as people. It's very connected to fractal art. So intuitively, we feel a connection to these types of geometric forms and organizational structures. So it's bringing kind of that science to a project. It was working with the Pittsburgh Art, I can't remember their last name, but Pittsburgh Art Organization, and doing these big blossoms of color that follow the spectrum of the chakras up the wall through the conservatory, through this, the building is the Center for Sustainable Landscapes there. And it's a building for public programs and classes and administrative spaces, gathering events. And there's an artist that created a piece that is completely natural, and she actually left it out in the rain there on site to grow richer and with more depth, and it welcomes touch. That's a hard thing to imagine right now, right? We're going through this time where we aren't touching. I think that will change. Obviously, we will cycle out of this. But there is that piece. There's also this wonderful loom that was a vision of the CEO, Richard Piancentini. It was wonderful. He brought this idea of watching his children in a Waldorf school environment. And they had this kind of loom that they contributed to. And so the idea for this piece was that there's a beautiful handmade, maybe 5 foot long loom with ribbons of yarn that the staff members on each day, one staff member would go observe the sky, select a color of yarn. There's all sorts of shades of creams and blues and kind of grays. The yarn for that color of the sky for that moment, and they would weave it through this handmade. Really simple, probably only takes 5 minutes for this experience, but it's a way to stop, still their mind, observe nature, and then contribute to this, what ends up being these long quilts of yarn, and they're beautiful. And so there's that. The fragrance comes from plants. I mean, there's different seasonal plants in the space. There's grapefruit and jasmine, lots of plants throughout the space. There's a beautiful piece out at the entry that is, again, a local artist that made it on site, and it's these ribbons of metal that kind of weave over this kind of flat water feature. The artwork serves a purpose to kind of create a gentle barrier between the paid experience and the non-paid experience for, just kind of a moderate level of security. And it connects down to the earth. It weaves over this flat water feature, and it connects up into the building almost like an umbilical cord. So there's all of these things. That's just 4 out of probably 50 pieces.
Oh my goodness, we could go on about this project for a long time. And the multisensory design approach is so unique that I had asked you what 6 senses there were, and now I'm realizing, well, there's only 5. But what it brings up is that this is an involved design process. And what I see so much in our work, including the house that I'm recording this in, it's design predicated upon transaction. It's transactional real estate at its finest. The utilitarian use was to build a box that sheltered us from the rain and the elements. And what you're describing looks like a design process that I have not been a part of, to have that level of intentionality and mindfulness. How do you go about I don't know if it's reversing, if that's the right word, but how do you bring all the actors together to enable a project to have all these different elements in it?
Sure. Well, I do want to just back up and take note of something you said, and that is the connection to the sixth sense. So I actually have a lot of clients that are willing to explore that space of intuition and consciousness in design. And that project, even in that project that I was mentioning, there's an artist that a few of her pieces were featured. And she is a Reiki master, and she puts intention into her work. Her name is P.C. Turkson. She puts intention into each piece of work as a healer. She paints these botanical motifs, sacred geometry, as if you were looking into a sunflower and you saw that center of the sunflower and it unfolds in this beautiful spiral geometry. She paints these beautiful, like this big, beautiful, sacred sunflower. With that intention, she puts that energy into the work. Now, in Western society, we don't talk enough about this. We don't talk about, the power of the mind and intention and healing. I believe in it. And I think it's essential, and I believe people can feel it. I think in the future, we'll see more research around this. But yeah, I think we should recognize the sixth sense more.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. And then as far as aligning different people in the projects for the co-creation work, it's very important for me to recognize and to acknowledge that I don't consider myself an expert, and I don't ever want to come onto a project as an expert. I want to come on as a resource, and I want to help build the capacity and the capability of the team, the owners, the design team, the landscape architect, the engineers, the contractor, the interior designer, whoever's working on that project. The community, for larger projects, right? We have community members, we have the underserved. Everyone needs to be in a room early on in the project and working together on how this project can evolve to foster that human nature connection, how it can support social and ecological evolution, really. I mean, it's big, but it can be done, it's broken down. So in these workshops, it's broken down in a really comfortable way. Now, for me, the Living Building Challenge has helped to create more of a foundation for this work to happen, because there's a requirement for Living Building Challenge projects that they must conduct an all-day workshop. Now, exactly how they conduct that, there's some suggestions, but everybody approaches it a little differently. For the work I do, I always start from a personal connection standpoint. I think it's all within us. So we talk about that unlearning, it's within us. We all have the capacity and that space to connect deeply to understand biophilia and to understand our role. So when people open to that, when they can understand it from a personal perspective, they are activated. There is a field of vitality that is created in the room. And we've been doing this even on virtual platforms now, because we have to. You can even feel it in a virtual room. You can feel the energy that's created, because again, people are out of their heads, they're into their hearts, they're into their bodies, and they're connecting. And from that point, it's and this is where regenerative thinking comes in. It is so much about your own experience, but I think where we get stuck as designers, it always stays as that personal experience. It's me-centric. It's me, it's my design. How far is that really going to get you? Is that going to really be for the betterment of the world and the project and the community? What if we started thinking about we, and we started thinking about being in service to that project and to the community? And early on, when we do these workshops early on, we build that vision, we connect the essence of that place, that again is regenerative thinking. It's about looking at the deep history, the watershed, the life shed, the people that were there before us, the indigenous people. It's all of this layering. And then through that day becomes nothing short of magical. Every workshop, it's amazing how people align. And one of the most powerful things about working this way is, yes, you wear the hat of the role that you're in, architect, designer, owner, but so much of this is also bridging and stepping out of that and working beyond what you even thought your capacity was or what you thought your role was. When we start as regenerative thinkers focusing on potential versus problems, then we release from this fragmented, closed down identity, whether it's personal or whether it's our contributions to the project. Everything opens up. And we work from whole. So, you know, everyone's working from this whole and you're more open. I mean, some of the best ideas that I've seen unfold on projects for creative ideas for the architecture has come from the engineer, or it's come from the contractor, and they're talking about sacred geometry and they're talking about a sense of awe. It's fabulous. It's fabulous to witness. It's a gift to be in the room and to see this energy and this process of co-creation. It really is.
What is different to me and why I was drawn towards this work, and especially the Institute, is it's asking generative questions, and it's coming from an environmental background. I can quickly become overwhelmed by the state of the world and the tragedies that are unfolding, including the social injustice movement that we're seeing, the ecocide that we've gone through, the economic disparity. And we can have a pity party about it. But by asking the right questions and not saying, how do we do less bad, but what does good look like? It's altering the course of history. Because it is a generative thought, it does unlock our collective potential. And that's why I really think a lot of people want to be a part of this, and they're seeking out you, including those artists, to say, wow, this is something different, and maybe we can be a part of something much bigger, and not necessarily a solution, but just a different path. And that's why I can look at a picture of your project and it resonates with me, and I don't have to be there on a mindful walk, but you can just tell right away.
Thank you.
You did mention biophilia. When did you start using that word in your lexicon in your work?
Yeah, that was a tough word. It's taken a while for me. But I am feeling pretty good about it now. So I first came across the term in probably 2012, and it was when I was working on the art project. And it was really because of the connection with the Living Building Challenge, where they were connected to the term, and they were still trying to figure it out. Is the term going to stick? Do we stay with it? Some people are uncomfortable with it. Well, in this conversation, I'm sure that this will resonate with you all. Just like we didn't need the term organic for a long time, we all of a sudden then needed to go back to this idea of organic, right? Because we needed a new way to think about our food and our connection to the food and the earth, and what was healing, right? So Erich Fromm coined the term in the mid-60s. Biophilia as our passionate love of life and all that is alive. Passionate love of life. We are deeply connected. As a species, we have spent 90% of our evolution in a a very deep and um, a foundation of reciprocity with nature. I mean, we were deeply connected. We understood the connection to the earth and all that she provides. And it's only been probably within the last 200 years that we just started to put up this divide. We've become very mechanical. We've maybe industrial revolution. We're not really talking about the history of why all of this happened, but it did. And so we find ourselves now in a day and age where we are spending that 90% time again, that 90% statistic, we are estimated in the US to spend over 90% of our time indoors. And what have we created? So yeah, I think the term is very relevant because we need a new way to think about it. We need that motivator to go back and learn from our ancestors, learn from indigenous people, how they cared and considered the connection to nature, how we need to restore, how we need to rethink all of these spaces. And this isn't just about the places we live. This is about our schools and our offices and of course our hospitals and our clinics. It's everything. It's all these spaces we're in, and it's, to me, I want those places to feel like those sacred places we walk into, those spiritual, I want them to feel amazing. I want them to kind of spark that light within us and make us better people, make us feel connected and safe and healed and healing.
I was going to ask you what your vision for the future is, and I think that is actually a great summation. What does stand out is that most of our built environment, especially in residential, has already been built. Some quote that I've heard is that 80% of our built environment in terms of our dwellings are already existing. And so what I'm very curious about from your perspective and opinion is, what can we do about the houses that are already in our subdivisions? Not everybody has the means or the ability or or is it really the right approach to take a building down to build a new living building in its place? Or I could be wrong about that. Let me not put a lid on where you want to go with this.
So I would never be able to answer that question fully without understanding the context. And okay, this is for me where regenerative thinking comes in, because if we look at the unique conditions, the project, the place, the people, I would say that there's always room to evolve. There's always things we can do on these projects. Can we put a few more windows in? Can we find views? I mean, schools break my heart. Most schools, there's no windows, and I understand we're balancing security. There's a lot going on, but those children need to connect to their circadian rhythms. They need natural light. They need the fractal movement. We know this through science. So for those that are less familiar with biophilic design, there is this incredible growing body of evidence that everything from neuroscience and the way our brains work to our endocrine systems, our hormonal systems, our stress response, our immune systems are all affected by nature. Of course they are. We've forgotten this. So whatever project we're working on, and I do think about this a lot. I think about the renovations, and I work a lot with renovation projects, and of course new construction and all these different project sectors. There's always places and room for them to evolve. I think it's getting a team that's kind of tuned in, that will just give a little more to the project as far as understanding its story of place and just thinking deeply. This doesn't have to take, sometimes it does, it takes years of investigation and exploration and understanding, but sometimes just to sit down and have a conversation and do a little deep thinking. And the answers will unfold. By looking at the patterns and becoming more familiar with the patterns, you'll have these aha moments and you'll know what's right for the project. Teams, I love it when teams come together and you can always find those patterns and they're like, oh, water, this project needs to express water. This is all about water. How do we express water? And it also challenges people and designers to think creatively. So this doesn't have to mean that it's an excessive, extraordinary budget. And one more thing about this process that I think is really important is that when we have these conversations early and upfront, and hopefully there's a group involved, right? So this is not just the designer taking this and owning it, but there's a group and there's a vision and there's a discussion. Two really important things happen along with a great design. And that is that the owners are much more invested. They understand why these strategies and integrations for human nature connection and these amazing visions, why they're so important. And so that when we have these times when the budget constraints come along, generally what I've observed is that they believe in these visions so much. There's a way, we find a way. We're able to reconcile. They're able to understand it more deeply and care. And then that translates to also the investment in purposeful work that the team has. I mean, I hear testimony from team members saying they've never felt this valued on a project. And they're willing and able to go the extra mile because they care so much. We should be caring about every project at that level, and we should be engaging our team members. I digress, I'm sorry. Your question was about, problem solving and all these renovations, and I go back to process, but I do believe the process holds a bit of a profound quality that will help the problem solving wherever you're at.
I'm definitely going to have to take more time to let that marinate, because it does resonate, and it leads me to my next question. I believe that you lead workshops, and how can we, as the general public, attend these, learn more of these? Are these going to get disrupted due to the pandemic situation that we're finding ourselves in? I think this is going to open a lot of people's eyes and hearts to the approach that you're talking about and want to learn more from you. What does that look like for us?
Well, I'll answer the second part of the question first, and that is about the current conditions. So I have two projects I'm working on right now that are very different, that are obviously challenged by this current time, and we're not able to gather. The first is for a small living building challenge project in Bend, Oregon, that is focused on really being budget conscious, like trying to find more value and trying to be very creative on the budget so that more homes and residences can consider the living building challenge as a possibility in their future. And the second is working for the Port of Seattle, and that's a completely different, for this Fisherman's Terminal major historic renovation project. We couldn't gather for both, and I am an in-person type of facilitator. I want to be on site and I want to get the team activated and working, and that was hard. But I also thought regenerative thinking, one of my favorite frameworks, regenerative thinking, is the Law of Three. And it's thousands of years old. It's rooted in the Sufi tradition, and it's been brought forward. I've become familiarized with it through some engagement and some reading with the regenerative business leader, Carol Sanford. And the law of three says that there's, there's always this activating force. It's evident in nature, it's evident in everything we do, an activating force. So the activating force here is we want to workshop. We don't want these projects to slow down. The resisting force or the constraint is we can't gather. We cannot be together. We can't be on site. So generally, quite often in Western society, we compromise, right? Okay, well, we'll do this next year, or we can't do a workshop, or the design team will just work independently. So regenerative thinking says, no, we don't settle. Nature doesn't settle. As humans, we often settle, we compromise. Nature's about harmonizing. Nature's about reconciling and evolving. So I took that lesson to heart and I thought, okay, let's try this. Let's take another lesson from regenerative thinking is that when we slow things down, we slow down a process, there's more opportunity for the nutrients to absorb. So instead of a full day workshop on site, let's look at virtual workshops. Let's do a series of them over maybe a couple weeks time. And then the participants can go out on their own in their own reflections with the safety they need to and the space they need to do the deep reflective work on site in a reflective way and bring back those patterns. And then I will help to synthesize it and bring it back to the group. And we kind of work that way. And it's been amazing. The things I've observed is that when people are given this time, they have become so much more thoughtful. They've been able to slow down. It's, in the questions when they go out to the site, and I'm asking them to look at the essence of place, to feel more, to open up their senses to that site, to what is and what they observe, and also what is missing. So I ask a lot of kind of hard questions, like what's also missing from that site? Are there certain bird sounds that are missing? Is there like what, we're looking for essence. We're looking to uncover and express essence of place. And I've gotten back feedback on these really powerful emotions people have felt. And it might take them back and they might write about a little bit about their childhood, and they might write about their recent divorce, and they might write about their own home. And it's like, wow. And of course, essence is there. I mean, it's all written within that. And then we look at the patterns, and it's beautiful work. And then it also, the other observation I would make about the value of virtual workshopping is that there's a certain amount of equity that is achieved, because no longer is it one or two voices in a room. I mean, it's wonderful. We have we have the big voices. They're always heard. That's their own essence. But sometimes what that does is, those softer, quiet voices, which are often so profound, they're not going to speak. They don't always speak up. I always look for ways to reconcile that and make sure all voices are heard. But the virtual workshops and the reflections have given them another way of doing deep reflection and having a voice and getting their ideas out there. So yes, we can still do the work we need to do even during this time, and in different ways if we're just thoughtful about it. And then the second part of your question about learning about workshops. There's resources out there. So we're starting to get more of the storytelling out in kind of just different YouTube videos and stories of place, and kind of constantly sharing at conferences. And, to me, it's really important that I don't hold this too close, that in order for me to grow and evolve, I need to share it. I need to test it. I want to activate other designers to have these tools, and so that they can evolve and grow within their own communities, and they can see if any of these ideas resonate with them and their work. So and I'm at a place right now that I'm trying to do more writing. I'm doing some graduate studies, and I'm trying to do some writing and get some more work out into the world on how we start layering biophilic design, which by no means should be prescriptive. I think you probably have already picked up on that, my viewpoint on that. But woven in this idea of regenerative thinking on wholes and nested systems and essence and potential. I want to do some writing. I want to do some more writing. I owe the world some more writing on that. Yeah, so it's in progress. It's always a work in progress.
Please share with us where can people find out about the digital workshops, the writings that you're going to be publishing. I want to know more. We don't have enough time to get remotely into all that you are and your work that you're doing.
Thank you for that, Neil. I have some of the information and links on my website, which is sonjabochart.com. And that's probably it right now. I mean, I don't know. I keep most record of it there and some link. And then, LinkedIn. I love to build community and connect with others. And I'm, again, this little intersection of professional practice and being able to contribute at, the national architecture practice of Shepley Bullfinch is I'm very grateful for that. And then to do the consulting work, Shepley has I do this through a lot of this work through a consulting branch that Shepley has called Lens Strategy. So it's been great to bring regenerative thinking. I also like to just state that it is wonderful to work on these projects that have evolved owners, and they're moving towards the Living Building Challenge. And it's equally important that we also, I think for me, also find those really hard projects too. Find those, everything we do, I think we can make change in, and we can find those nodal points. We can find those places that we can make change. So that's pretty powerful for me. So I know my work is in a lot of different places, and that pushes me, that helps me evolve too.
That's fantastic. Sonja, thank you so much for your time. And I started saying this a while ago in our podcast episodes, is that I thank you for your work, and I deeply appreciate it. But I also think that the world appreciates your work, because it is truly an evolution in a very good sense. And I'm very excited to see what comes out of it. I am very much more hopeful by having these kinds of conversations than I was, let's say, even a year ago. And to see you overlap your interests and your life experiences, it goes back and it proves my point of, you are the sum of your experiences. And if you didn't go through what you went through, and you weren't interested in yoga and Reiki and growing up on a homestead in Arizona, we wouldn't have the opportunity to get to experience your work. Mm-hmm. And I only hope that in the future I get the chance to physically be at a workshop or in a building that you're a part of, as not as an expert, but as a resource.
Well, thank you, Neil. I appreciate all the broad awareness you're bringing to regenerative thinking in so many different ways. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Okay, everybody, that is a wrap. Thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope that you got a lot out of it. These conversations are so important to me, and they are so important to the times that we're finding ourselves in. If you want to connect with other like-minded individuals and with thought leaders in this movement, be sure to check out our Facebook group. It's called Regenerative Real Estate. You can find it, request to join. We'd love to have you build the community with us. If you want to find out more about us and our organization Latitude, you can go to chooselatitude.com. We're a Pacific Northwest-based real estate sales and development team that help people live in more thoughtful and resilient ways. We believe in sustainability as a powerful force for good, and that's why we're putting so much emphasis on creating meaningful dialogue and content like this podcast to bring it to you. Just one last ask before we end this podcast. If you could please go to whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on and leave us a rating and review and hit subscribe. That way you can get notified whenever we're dropping the next episode. And the feedback is great for us. It really validates what we're doing, and it really goes to signal to potential guests that, hey, people are tuning into this. They want to hear from you, and they want to hear about the regenerative real estate space. Okay, thanks again for listening. Until next time.